Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining this talk, either in person or live online. My name is Nicola Corti, and today I'm going to talk about bringing the new React Native architecture to the open source community, fall edition. If you were at App.js, you might have seen this talk already, but we do have some updates, things that got developed, new capabilities, and things that we would love to share with you all. Mandatory slide about myself. I'm an engineer in the React Native team. You can find me online as Corti Nico, either on Twitter, on GitHub. Feel free to send me messages, ask me questions. I'm more than happy to hear feedback. So let's jump straight into it because we have a lot to cover. If you were to search React Native new architecture today on, let's say on YouTube, because if you want to check a video and see what's going on, you will find actually a lot of content. And I picked some talks, which I think are representative of the new architecture as a whole. And you can see that the first one, it's from 2018. So the new architecture has been in the media for a while. And if you were React Native EU virtually last year, my colleague Joshua gave this talk, which I invite you to pick up. It's about the new React Native bringing the Fabric renderer to the Facebook app. This is a story of how long it took for us. And, well, as you can see from the dates, it took us some time. So the new architecture started in Q2 2018, at least from my researches. That's what I found out. And initially, it was accounted as a 6-month project. It turns out that, well, that's not the case. Because the Facebook app, it's using React Native quite extensively, and product developers have been squeezing all the possible performance gains out of React Native. So going and changing the engine of an airplane, which is going at hundreds of kilometers an hour, is not easy. So it took us nearly 3 years or so. And then we said, okay, so we rolled out, and the Facebook app is on new architecture. What do we do now? Well, now we need to tell the humans how to do it. And that's where the complexity starts, because we, luckily, have the opportunity to see the whole code base and do changes, do breaking changes as we do, and update the whole app. But that's not the same thing when we go in the open source. So that's where this talk starts. How do we actually let people outside of Meta use the capabilities that we developed? And so let me tell you about those capabilities. And if you're at this talk and you still haven't understood the reasons behind the new architecture, let me actually spend a couple of words on that. Because I keep on hearing sometimes people that ask me, but why you even did that? Well, it's first all about the bridge. You probably know what I'm talking about, but there has been a lot of performance implications of having like JSON messages passed over. So the new architecture has the goal of getting rid of the bridge, but at the same time, we also took the opportunity of rewriting a lot of the renderer and the internals of the framework using C++. Historically, we used to have different implementation between Android and iOS, which opened the door to a lot of discrepancies and bugs and things that were just behaving differently between the two platforms. This also allowed us to share new capabilities and functionalities with all the platforms just because we're going to develop them in C++. We don't need to re-implement them twice. Moreover, we took a stance at the developer experience perspective, and we realized that developers tend to write a lot of boilerplate code that needs to deal with types. And so we thought, like, how about we create a tool that tries to get an input, a spec file, and auto-generates a lot of this boilerplate. This allowed us to deliver type safety to our product. And also, you should think as the new architecture as the foundation for a lot of new capabilities that we will be releasing in the coming years. So at first, you might feel like, oh, this is a lot of work for me to migrate, and what am I getting out of it? You will get new things that will be developed on the new architecture only. So what is the new architecture? We have some components which in the documentation you will find them referenced as pillars. And let me touch briefly on them. So first, we have the new renderer. And the code name for this is Fabric. Then we have a new native module system, which we call the turbo modules. We do have a component which allows to generate a lot of code to support those pillars, which is called the Codegen. And then we have a new way of starting the apps, which is called the bridgeless mode. So once everything has been migrated, we can effectively get rid of the bridge. Sadly, I don't have the time to deep dive into all of those. You will find docs online, but I want to touch on one of that, the Codegen, just to give you a glimpse of what's the vision behind this component. So the idea behind the Codegen is we want you to write a spec file that describes the API of a component or a module. And from that file, we will generate code for you that will help you implementing it. So you will have a spec file, like in this case, I'm creating a native module, and I'm declaring that I want something which is able to answer the ultimate question, which takes an input, a string, and returns a number. And I will register it. So the key part here is this. So what the Codegen does, it takes an input, this spec file, it analyzes this function and understands that is a function called answer the ultimate question as an input type, a return type. From that, we can generate platform-specific code. So let's take a quick look at it. On Android, what we're going to generate is this native answer solver spec, which implements like turbo module and so on as a constructor, and it offers an abstract method called answer the ultimate question, which takes a string in Java and returns a double. So this is abstract. So the idea here is that we generated this for you, you don't need to generate that, you will just have to, well, write what is the ultimate, the answer to the ultimate question. So you just have to implement this method. On iOS, the situation is similar. So we create a protocol with, again, same function. We convert the JavaScript or TypeScript types to the platform-specific one, and then we leave you the deal to implement the business logic. So with the new architecture, it comes like a lot of new infrastructure pieces in the equation, which we had to add and we had to adapt. And I want to touch briefly on build tools, just because it's a topic that is close to me, and I really like it. And I want to expose you to some of the complexities that we are adding, and we are trying to also encapsulate and make your life easier. As you probably know, at Meta, we build everything with Bach. But we can't pretend that you will use also Bach in your open source projects. So we had to adapt all of our open source pipelines to be able to invoke the Codegen and understand that there is also C++ code and so on. So how did we do this? So on Gradle, on Android, we extended our Gradle configuration. So for example, you will see that there is C++ code. As I was saying before, we do have a core now, which is written in C++. We allow also user to write modules which are C++ only. So there is some C++ code that needs to be compiled at a certain point. So you will start seeing CMake files or headers files and so on. Again, the feedback that I hear from a lot of people is like, I'm a web engineer. I don't want to hear about C++. So we are trying to encapsulate as much as possible these complexities by still allowing you to go heavy and write C++ code if you want. So you know that it's under the hood, but you're not supposed to touch it. Like you should live your life happily without knowing it. For Java and Kotlin, we actually took a stance and encapsulated all the new architecture logic inside the so-called React Native Gradle plugin. This is a collection of tools that allows us to build Android apps and plug all the React logic needed. So historically, you might have seen a file called react.gradle, which was just like imported and included everywhere. The new React Native Gradle plugin is going to replace that file in the future and will also contain all the logic to handle the Codegen, has more tests. It's like the next generation of Gradle logic. On iOS, we did a similar work on the CocoaPod side of things. So we do have a custom logic files written in Ruby. We also spent quite some time writing tests for those. So, well, like again, what I keep on hearing from the community is that like updating React Native versions is hard. And one of the reasons is because we had a lot of infrastructure code which was untested, was unclear what it was doing. So with the new architecture, we actually took a stance and looked at those files and try to like reorganize them and make them also easier to integrate with all the possible scenarios you might have. I also want to touch a little bit on Hermes, because you might find it referenced in the new architecture documentation. If you're not aware of Hermes, is our in-house built JavaScript engine, and you will find it recommended for the new architecture. So as of now, whenever you report a bug, if it's a bug related to Hermes, and the new architecture, trust me, there will be more people looking at that. If you use the new architecture without Hermes, technically you can still use it. It's recommended, it's not like required. But please consider using it. If you can't use Hermes, please tell me why. I will make sure that the right person receives that feedback. And from version 69 of React Native, we actually shipped a change called bundled Hermes. This means that every version of React Native contains a version of Hermes which is known to be fully compatible with that version of React Native. For example, here you will see that the engine is Hermes for React Native 69. The reason why we did that is because React Native and Hermes are tightly coupled, and compiling them in an isolated way exposed us to a lot of runtime crashes and problems. And this helps us, both us and the Hermes team, to fully understand if there are incompatibilities between the two frameworks. As of React Native 070, which is going to be out really, really soon, Hermes will be the default engine for React Native. So historically, it was not. Now it will be. So when you create a new project, it will be on Hermes unless you want to disable that. Again, if you need to disable that, let us know. Back to new architecture. Couple of changes that we also took a stance at looking into it, which was highly requested, is modern languages. We keep on hearing from the community that you want to use TypeScript. And well, if you looked at the first iteration of the new architecture docs, which were released in December last year, the #1 comment is like, I don't want to use Flow to write my specs. Literally. Like, I don't want to have a fully TypeScript project with just one file written in Flow. So I'm happy to share that the Codegen, the React Native Codegen supports TypeScript, so you can write your spec in TypeScript as well. It's a work in progress. Internally at Meta, we use the Flow version, so do not expect the same level of battle testing that we do with the Flow Codegen. But again, there has been like involvement also from the community to extend the TypeScript Codegen. And again, if you have problems, just let us know. On Android, well, it's all about Kotlin, which is a language that I personally really love. And it's fully supported in React Native. You can write your React Native new application up with Kotlin. There are no non-incompatibilities. We also spent quite some time updating the website to be bilingual. So now on the React Native website, you will find docs for Java and Kotlin side by side. Here I linked an issue, which is like an umbrella issue where you can contribute and update the last pages which are missing, which don't have yet the Kotlin equivalent for the Java snippets. And you might expect the template, the new app template, to be migrated to Kotlin at a point in future. We don't have a date for these, but the whole Android ecosystem is moving in this direction. It just makes the code smaller, easier to maintain, and so on. And on iOS, well, on iOS, we are looking into it. It's a harder discussion. Happy to chat about it like later, but sadly we don't have updates to share at this stage. But we hear that people want to write Swift, So yeah, we're looking into that. I also want now to give an update on timeline and versions. So when things happen and what happened when. So the first version of React Native to fully support the new architecture is React Native 68. Actually, the new architecture was released a little bit earlier, so some apps or libraries might try to use it in some form. But 68 is the first version where the template offers a simple flag which turns on all the logic to try the new architecture. So you need to be on the version if you want to try it in a human, feasible way. Then we have 69. In 69, we shipped a couple of changes. As I said before, bundled Hermes and also React 18. I will dive into React 18 a bit later, but yeah, it's quite of a significant change of React, and React Native 69 is the first version of React Native which comes with React 18. So if you want to use the latest version, you need to be on that one. Then we have React Native 70, which, as I said, is going to be out really, really, really soon. And yeah, here are a lot of changes again. Hermes is now the default engine, and we do have a couple of other changes specifically related to the new architecture. First, auto-linking. As Lucas was saying during the keynote, well, auto-linking is a game changer. And the reality was that auto-linking was not working on Android for new architecture, because we have also C++ code. This has been developed by ColdStack, thanks for doing that, and is now shipped in 70. So you're free to use it. It will work completely transparently, so you will not have to do anything. It will just work out of the box. We shipped support for CMake. So historically, we used to use a file called android.mk to let you configure how the native build should work, which was kind of black magic. No one knew how to work, how that worked. Now we use CMake, which is a little bit more user-friendly. And also another requested feature was the unified Codegen config. So historically, in 68 and 69, the Codegen needs to be configured differently between Android and iOS, like in 2 different files, which went out of sync quite easily and so on. Now with 70, we fixed this issue, and this is easy for everyone, so on. So my recommendation is, if you look into the new architecture, 70 is an amazing version to start looking into it. And then, what's next? Well, we have 71. And I want to give a sneak peek of what we have on main, because it's merged, so you can just go there and check it out. We are taking a stance at simplifying the template. So the new app project, which you have as soon as you do React Native init, it's quite complicated. There are a lot of things which you don't necessarily need to be exposed to, and we took a stance and we cleaned them up, a lot of them. Specifically with 68, the template grew quite a lot because we had to add a lot of new architecture logic, and in 71 we started see how much we can simplify it and reduce it, so it's not as scary as it was before. And more to come, which it's not merged yet, so keep an eye on main to know what's coming. And yeah, in 72, who knows, to the infinity and beyond. And I'm actually extremely excited because today we are in 5 from Meta, and we are so keen and eager to hear your feedback. So if you try the new architecture, if you add struggles, if you add problems, please stop us and tell us, hey, this doesn't work for me because you folks changed everything and so on. So we don't want to ship breaking changes. We want to make this experience as great as possible, and we can do so by hearing what you feel is working or not working for you. So, React 18, I briefly touched on that. New major feature of React, and if you go on the blog post, which my colleagues wrote on the React blog, you will find a thing called concurrent React, and new APIs like start transition and so on, which you might want to use. Well, it's crucial to understand that if you are on React Native 67 or React Native 68, you are essentially on React 17. Even if you go on your package.json and change the version of React, at runtime, you will still be running on React 17. The version, the way our React and React Native are versioned is tightly coupled. So React Native decides which version of React to consume. With 69, 70, and so on, you can actually use React 18. But where is the catch? The concurrent React feature and those new APIs, start transition, and so on, they've been built on top of the new architecture. So it means that you need to be on the new architecture to use concurrent React. If you are on the old architecture, you are essentially using a legacy mode of React, which it's fine for now if you keep on updating your React version, React Native version, but you should start considering the new architecture. There is no better time to migrate your app than now. Because now we are looking at the ecosystem, we are looking at the migration path, we are looking at user reports. In 1 year from now, this might not be the case anymore. So don't be late. Okay, so that being said, I hope I convinced you to take a look at the new architecture, because now I want to touch on docs and material. So what do we have ready for you? And yeah, here to quote Coldstack again. This episode of the React Native show, they were mentioning on how it's basically all about the docs. Like, the new arc is there, but if no one tells me how to use it, well, that's going to be a challenge. So that's why we spent a lot of time to create documentation and material to let you understand how to embrace the new architecture. First, the official docs. So on reactnative.dev, you will find a new section called the new architecture in the guides. This has been reshaped and rewritten and extended multiple times. And again, we want to hear feedback. It explains you those concepts that they're briefly touched, and hopefully will give you all the necessary instructions to update your project to use this. And we also have another section called Migrating to the New Architecture, which contains specific instructions on how to migrate either your library or your apps. We also have a new section called Architecture, without new, on top, which we are starting to populate, and it contains deep dives and technical documentation on the framework. This has been highly requested because over the years, the only way to understand how things worked was to read the code or to find a Facebook engineer and ask them like how it works. So there you will find documentation on specifically how the renderer works, and we actually spent time creating diagrams and try to explain as much as possible how the internals work. Again, if those are not clear, if things are missing, let us know. As I said before, I talked about the new app template, and we believe this is a great entry point to experience the new architecture. When you do npx React Native init, you are exposed to a new project, and we spend time on updating it so that trying the new architecture is as easy as flipping a switch. And how do you flip the switch? On iOS, that happens at pod install time. So normally, you will do pod install, and to try the new architecture, you can just do that using this environment variable, rct, new arch enabled equal 1, and just run your app. And that will be a new architecture app running in your iOS simulator. On Android, the experience is similar. We do have a file called Gradle.properties, which contain a property called new arch enabled, which is set to false by default for now. And you can just change it to true and run it with React Native run Android. To be sure that everything is running fine, Metro will tell you which are the starting parameters, and you will see that Fabric is set to true and concurrent root is set to true. So this means things got passed by, the renderer got it, and yeah, the magic is happening. Other material that might be helpful for you. We started a working group. These started from the experience we had with the React 18 working group, and is a discussion-only repository, which allows you to interact with other people which are touching the new architecture, and also ask questions and deep dive. You will find specific sections on like libraries, documentation, and so on. The group at first might look closed, but there is an invite link that you can follow on the homepage. Fill in the details, and we will add you to the group just after. And then we have samples, because we believe that docs are great, but if I can give you a sample app or something that you can touch with your hands and build and see how it works, that is also great content. So we do have a sample repository called RN New Architecture App, which contains a collection of branches, and every branch explains how our app has been migrated from a version of React Native to another, and enabling the new architecture over there. We also took a stance and documented step by step every commit that we did, providing instructions on how to do that. And trust me, I was migrating a library this morning, and I was reading this, so it's great stuff. We also have an equivalent repository for libraries, which contains a similar approach, but from a library perspective. So how can I create a library which it's compatible with both the old and the new architecture, so I can cover all the user base of React Native. I also want to call out a couple of libraries which already started migrating or already migrated and released a new version. We truly believe that this is a migration that we're gonna all do together. So what we are looking at is friction points and how we can smooth them out. But library authors needs to be on board on this and needs to understand the importance of this migration and what are the steps needed. And if there are blockers, please, again, tell us. And now, to wrap up, I really hope that in 6 months from now, in a year from now or so, when I will search React Native New Architecture, I will read your migration story, and you will tell us how great we did or how badly we did. Like, I'm happy to any kind of feedback. And really, we are here to hear your migration story, hear what doesn't work, and hear what works well. Meta is fully committed to open source and to building this together. So, like, we really want to hear what is going on and what works well and what not. And with this, I first want to thank you very much for listening, and I want to recall that contributions are more than welcome, not only on React Native, but all on the family of frameworks we develop, Metro, Hermes, React, and so on. And thank you very much for listening.